this is speech number 2, and this is my audience.
And me.
Okay. Sorry, I'm kind of okay, so just a brief history on myself. I'm a fisherman. I was raised that way. I fished my whole life. And just in the past 10 years, I picked up fly fishing, which is what I kind of want to talk about today. And so this is kind of an experience that I've had, not, I can't recount a specific time, but there have been times when I've been fishing, and you just do the old traditional worm on the end of a hook in the water, and I can recall times sitting there for several hours and not having a single bite, not catching a single fish. And then at certain points in that fishing period, there will be these little ripples on the top of the water, and you'll start to notice that it's fish, and they're coming to the surface. And that's when I learned that they'll eat the bugs off the top of the water, and so that's where fly fishing comes in. That it attempts to mimic that process. And so let me start with just a short history on fly fishing. Fly fishing has been documented as early as 200 AD. There was a philosopher, his name is Aelian, that's his last name, it's A-E-L-I-A-N, and he wrote a book, and in that book, he says, let me see if I can remember what it's called. It's called On the Nature of Animals. It's a book that he wrote several thousand years ago, and it's been translated. And in that book, he talked about observing the Macedonians while they fished for their food. He talked about their lures, and he said they wrapped their hooks in red wool and then attached to each of the lures 2 of the yellowish feathers that grow below a rooster's wattles. They lowered these lures into the river on lines about 6 feet long, and the fish are so excited to see the bait that they rush up, mouths wide open, and are quickly caught. That was documented as early as 200 AD, was about the time period that he did that, or that he said that. And so, coming forward a couple thousand years, the time period spanning between 1800 and 1850, which was considered the era of innovation for fly fishing. That's where we got a lot of our traditional equipment that we use today. They started using bamboo to make their rods, or other sturdy materials that we use today. The clamp foot reel was invented, which is this type of reel. It has 2 feet on the back of it, and it clamps right to the fishing reel. A lot of the fly patterns that we use today were invented during that time period and are still used today. So let me just kind of go over some of the equipment that we use. The difference, the major difference between fly fishing and spinner fishing, or just regular fishing that you picture. Obviously, there's a major difference in the rod. This one's a fly fishing rod, and this is a spinning rod or a bait casting rod. And the length has to do with the way that the lure is casted. So a bait casting rod or a spinning rod, you depend upon the weight of your lure to cast the lure. So this is would go with this fishing rod, and it's fairly heavy, and so when you cast, it's the weight of this that casts that lure. Fly fishing, oftentimes you're casting things that are extremely small. This is made to imitate like a large mosquito or mayfly, and so you're depending on the weight of the fishing line. You can see that this line is quite a bit thicker than this line here, and so it's the weight of that line that helps project the lure or your fly into where you want it to be casted. There are several different types of flies that are used. They each have a specific purpose. Just the general types of flies, there are streamers, which this is considered a streamer. What this is it imitates a small minnow or a leech swimming through the water. There's terrestrials, which that class of flies imitates like land bugs So like this one's a grasshopper. I've got a beetle in here. I've seen things that imitate ants. I've even seen mice that have been tied that fall into that classification that a fish would eat. This is considered a nymph. Nymph fly. It goes down in the water, and what it does is it imitates bugs at certain larval stages. So as they're hatching from their eggs and making their way to the surface, so it's waterborne insects. And then this is a dry fly, and the reason I call it a dry fly is because these ones are made to float on top of the water, and so it's the adult stage of the nymphs. So it's like a full-grown, like I said earlier, like a mosquito or a mayfly or other types of flying insects. And then obviously in bait fishing, you would use a worm or some kind of lure that would imitate a fish or other food that bugs or fish eat. Fly fishing is different from just normal bait fishing in that it takes different skills. To be able to cast a fly rod is different than just swinging it from over your shoulder out into the water. You have to actually do they call it a Norman McLean. I'll just say the way he says it. He was an avid fly fisherman and also an award-winning author. He wrote a book called The River Runs Through It, which there's a movie about that now that's fairly popular. And he wrote in one of his books about fly casting. He said it's an art that is performed on a 4-count rhythm between 10 and 2 o'clock. And so, it's you're going back and forth, and only every so often is your fly actually coming to the water. That back and forth motion is part of getting your line to, your fly and your line to where you want it to go and the length that you want it to be. Another skill that a fly fisherman should have is being able to match the hatch, which is a common term that you'll hear among fly fishermen. What that means is you just want to match what the fish are eating that day. That's why you can see in my fly boxes, all of them look like this. They all have several different types of flies in them because they all imitate different bugs. And so you try and figure out what the fish are eating that day and cast that to them, so that they'll eat it. And so in conclusion, if any of you ever become fly fishermen, I know I asked you before if you fish, and you'll have a chance to catch fish in a different way than you've ever experienced before. If there are times that you're bait fishing and you can't seem to catch that fish, maybe try fly fishing, and you'll be surprised at how well you'll catch fish. So I wanted to quote Mont Burke, who is an author of articles that make it into Forbes magazine, was writing about different fly fishers in corporate places. And he wrote actually about Donald Trump Jr., and he quoted him saying, this is Donald Trump Jr. speaking, he says, "I may be the first Wharton grad to leave school and become a trout bum. During the spring and summer, I'd work for a few months and then spend a month living from the back of my truck, hitting all the Blue Ribbon rivers in Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana." I know that he talked about how much he loved fly fishing and that it actually